Hi, it's Tammy from Shabby Fabrics. You know, I brought you a border panel stripe apron that was several weeks ago. So if you're just seeing this and you haven't seen the other one and you want to make a full-size apron, check out that video. However, I'm going to show you how to make this adorable little apron hot pad. This is a mini apron hot pad. There's some steps to this, and I've made several so I can run you through some tips and techniques on how to make sure you are successful when making yours. All right, so let's get started right away. This project uses a mini charm. The collection that I'm using is called Buon Natale. This is by Fig Tree Quilts, and it is adorable. We do have a limited number of kits available for these hot pads. So if you're looking for a kit for this, grab it, because in your kit we have included your batting, your Insel Bright, your Shape Flex, your mini charm, your lace for the pocket, these little D-rings for the apron strap right here. You have enough in your kit to make 2 apron hot pads. You don't have to think about trying to buy anything else. Just pick up your kit and go. All right? The other thing that you might want to consider is a template. The little apron hot pad. This template makes your life much easier. Now there is a paper template in the pattern. So if you've seen if you've already purchased the pattern and you've seen that, you see, this is what we have gone to. This acrylic template makes all the difference in the world when you are making these. They come out the same size every single time. It's easy. I can cut around this. I don't have to trace things and then cut with scissors. So I'm going to show you how to use this template. All right? Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to make your patchwork with your mini charms. So you're just going to lay these out in a grid pattern. And I'm going to try to kind of mimic what I'm doing here. Something like this. Whatever you want to do, lay these out. Got a red one, another green one, however you want your charms to be. Keep in mind that in the center, these 2 squares are going to be covered up by your pocket that's going on here. There we go, I had an extra. Okay, so we lay out our patchwork. We're going to put this together with a scant 1/4 inch. Now the reason we're using a scant 1/4 inch is because when you get it complete, your template needs to fit on top of it. All right, and I found that if you're using a 1/4 inch or a little bit larger than a 1/4 inch, because sometimes it's difficult to know where to sew on the jagged edges of a mini charm, scant 1/4 inch is your friend. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem getting this to fit onto your patchwork. Now, let's say you've already sewn your patchwork and you're like, now what do I do? Good news, there are extra charms in a pile. You're going to take those extra charms and you just make another row at the bottom, and now you have plenty of room to put your template on. All right, so don't worry if you have not sewn this with scant 1/4 inch. But if your template doesn't fit, that's how you fix it. Okay? All right, so we put our template, we put our pieces together. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to layer them with a piece of batting, and we just have Warm and Natural and your backing fabric. All right, layer it like this. Put your apron front on top, and now we quilt it. All right, so I just chose just to do a really quick crosshatch like this. I just took a friction pen and just drew some lines and some green thread and just stitched it. All right, I just needed this to fit. All right, so I did test this to know that it will fit. So I want you to see when I've sewn this with scant 1/4 inch, I do have a bit across the top. My sides I've got easily, and I do have a little bit across the bottom. All I need is the size of the template. I don't need to worry that I need extra. Just whatever this template fits is how much patchwork you need. All right? Okay, so let me show you where we go now. I'm going to center this on, and there are center marks on here, here, and here at the top, and the center is here and here. So I'm just going to make sure my patchwork is centered on here. This is my pocket. So I'm just going to drop this down a little bit because I know where my pocket is going to go, right here on these two squares. All right, I like that. I'm going to use a 28mm rotary cutter today. I find that very easy to get around these curves. I love a 45mm, but it's a little bit big for me to be working in close proximity to my fingers. I would rather keep that blade a little smaller and a little easier to control. That's why I'm using a smaller blade. Make sure that you do have a fresh blade in there because you're going to be cutting through multiple thicknesses. And so it's much easier if you have a nice clean blade or a nice sharp blade. All right, so I am going to use a spinning mat. This is the Creative Grids rotating mat. The other thing I want to point out is I have put grip dots on the back of this template. If you can see on here, this template is very slippery on this patchwork. But the minute I put grip dots on it, it is solid. It is not going anywhere. I like that, especially when my hands are in close proximity to an open blade. All right, it's just a safety thing. Okay, so let me recenter this. Okay, this is where I want that. So my first cut I'm going to make is going to be across the top of this. All right, and now I'm going to just start here and just gently curve around, just like that. Now let's say you have a paper template. What you're going to want to do is you're going to take your paper template, and Joyce recommends that you line it with like a manila file folder, something to make it a little bit heavier, and that you use that for a template. Or you could use template plastic, Quilter's template plastic, to maybe make it a little bit stiffer, but then you would trace around it with a friction pen, and you would then cut it out with scissors. All right, so I'm almost done. You can see how quick and easy it is to use this. This template is amazing. It's a huge time saver. And right back up, just like that. Okay, you see how that didn't move? Perfect. All right. Now, let's talk about making a pocket. This adorable little pocket on here is really a pocket. You see I put my fingers in it. Let's talk about making that little pocket. All right, so I'm going to set this aside for right now. Okay, I'm going to use the pocket template. All right, and so we are going to take our pocket. Our pocket is a piece of whatever fabric you've got for your pocket. We chose just to use the same as what our lining and our backing is for the pocket. I like the way it coordinates with the little binding on here. So this is my pocket. This is my pocket lining, and it's just got a little bit of shape flex put onto it, like that. Okay, so just trace your pocket on there. Now you can put your pocket on, I'm going to show you this. I found that by moving my template all the way to the top of this, I don't have to cut this line. I don't have to do anything with that. I just have to trace around this, pin the two together, and we're going to sew them. All right? So when I sew this, I'm going to turn it right side out. Okay? So we're going to start here, back tack all the way around, sew on the line, over, back tack it again. Do a back stitch here. That way it's going to hang on to it when you turn it through. All right? So after you've sewn it, it looks like this. Cute, right? I love this. All right, so now I'm going to clip these curves. I'm going to clip these points off, and then we're going to turn it through. All right, so I'm going to take a pair of scissors. I like these Karen K. Buckley scissors. They have a serrated blade, and the tips are very sharp. So I'm just going to clip this edge, being very careful not to clip my stitching. Don't want to do that because then I have to restitch it. So I'm just going to clip around. All right, now I'm going to trim this seam allowance to 1/8 of an inch. It's going to help it lay flatter if you trim that seam allowance down a little bit. Just like that. Okay, remember I said I was going to clip my corner. I'm just going to clip it like this and like this. All right? Okay, let's go ahead and turn that through. I'm going to get my iron heating up. Okay, very easy. Open, stick your fingers in there, you got it. I like a point turner. I'm going to use the point to kind of come in here and help me push out these corners. Oh, that looks great. And around again. Just like that. All right. Now I'm going to press this. Take my iron, just give this a good press. There's a little steam on there if you like. I just want it to lay flat. When I get to this, I'm going to fold this in 1/4 of an inch like this and put my iron on that. And you see I chose the side that had the stabilizer on it because I know I can manipulate the fabric very easily. So now I can manipulate this fabric to match whatever I'm doing here. So pull it out a little bit, push it in, pull it out, do whatever you need to do to get it straight. A couple little threads there. And I'm actually going to take a small pair of scissors. I'm just going to pull the seam slightly in just so this is even. There we go, I like that. Okay, repress, a little bit of steam so it knows we mean it and we want it to stay there. Cute little pocket. Okay, that's adorable. And that's going to go right here. What about this lace? Well, here's how we're going to put the lace on. Trust me, I have spent some time with this project and I know the best way to put the lace on is by hand. Joyce says to get a hand needle. Well, of course, I'm going to try to find an easier way because hand stitching is not my first go-to, okay? I'm going to pick up some glue. I'm going to pick up something, not a hand needle, right? Because this is fussy to me, and I don't like the fussy part. However, please trust me, glue is not your friend here because this lace is cotton lace, and it will absorb the glue. And it keeps absorbing it, and it doesn't stick to the fabric. The fabric's absorbing the glue, the lace is absorbing the glue. The only thing that's getting glue on it is my hand, not where I need it, and it's not staying there. It doesn't stick. All right, so let's look at the placement of the lace on the actual pocket. And you can see this small flat part right here on the lace. That is what I'm lining up with the edge of this pocket. It's perfect, right? This lines up with the pocket and you can see through it. So you can see how this just lines up and this follows right along all the way around, okay? So let's take our needle and thread. And now I'm just going to take a stitch. Now, I am not going to stitch this. First of all, you have to remember that no one's ever going to see this stitching. All right, and you can see my giant stitches here. That's all good and fine because when you put this onto the apron, you're actually stitching this down by machine. You're gonna stitch it, it's gonna be on there. So I am just taking these little tiny stitches just like that. I am not, you see how big my stitch is? It's huge, right? This lace does not have to withstand a gale force wind here. All right, it just needs to stay on the pocket. So now when you get to here, you're like, oh boy, that's kind of weird. Well, let's look at how I did that. So Joyce tells you to add fullness. Well, the only way to add fullness, you can see how I did it here, is you're going to add a little tuck here. Okay, So now I'm at my corner and I need to start adding fullness to it. So I'm going to just take my needle, I'm going to put this back, I'm going to take a little tiny tuck there and I'm going to immediately stitch that tuck in. Just like that. Okay. Now I'm going to move it over like this. See, I'm getting there. Let's take another little tuck and stitch it in. Remember that no one's going to see your stitching, so it doesn't need to be neat. It doesn't need to pass inspection by anyone. I'm going to take a tuck just like that. My tight kind of came out. Let me do it again. There we go. So I'm just hanging onto that with my thumbnail as I'm stitching that. But you can see how it's starting to gather and it's just kind of coming around. Just take your needle and drag it. See how I just moved that lace over? Ooh, that's looking really good. I'm almost there. Take another stitch. Okay, I'm going to come back on. I'm watching my seam allowance around here. That's a tricky part too. You got to watch that. You see how I'm just pulling that lace around where I want it? Come here. There it is right there. Fold that tuck over and take a stitch. So it is a little bit fussy, but it's not so difficult that you can't do it. But trust me, a hand stitch is the best way to do this. There we go. And another little stitch. And I'm just taking tiny little stitches because you don't want your stitches to go through to the front or then you have to rip them out and do it again. I don't want to do that. That's not something we want to do. All right, I'm just going to keep on going here. Another stitch, we're almost to the end. Oop. Okay, when I get to the end, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to trim this about 1 inch bigger than my pocket. I'm going to fold this in back into itself, right, like I did over here, because I want that lace on the inside. I don't want you to be able to see what I did there. So this is what it looks like from the outside, and I like that, okay? So I did that by folding this lace to here and folding it to the inside, just like that, okay? And then I'm just going to stitch it down and tie it off, and we are going to have a pocket. Okay, look how adorable this pocket is when you put it on. I love how cute that is. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pin this pocket in place. I'm going to use a cool pin by the Gypsy Quilter. All right, I'm going to just kind of pin this on. I'm not using my fine patchwork pins here because this is so thick and heavy. I know better than to use something like that. All right, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to sew here all the way around with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, all right? Let's go do that. All right, we have our cute pocket attached. Let's move on to the next step. That's going to be to add the top band across the top of the apron, all right? So to do that, I'm going to take the piece that we cut for that, and I'm just going to fold it directly in half, like this. All right, I'm going to put this on just like this, and I'm going to take a couple Wonder Clips. I'll dump them out because they're easier for me to grab. We're going to need a few here when we do the binding on this. So we're just going to kind of clip this on here like this. And now stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, I'm going to go do that. And when I come back, we're going to fold it over and I'm going to show you how I top stitch it. Okay, so I've sewn this on. We're going to take it to the iron. I'm going to flip this little band up and I am going to press this fairly well. I'm going to give it a little bit of steam because I want that crease to be set. Turn it over. And now I'm just going to fold it over the back. You can see where my stitch line is. So we just fold it over to cover the stitch line. And I'm pulling on this. Now, Wonder Clips again to the rescue. Now I'm clipping it like this. You see how I'm putting the clip on upside down? There's a reason for that. I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to top stitch it from the front. So I want that flat part of the clip next to my machine so it'll just glide right along. Okay, so you can see when you look at your binding right here, and grab something to point with, you can see the top of my binding and I can see the bottom of it poking down. You see that right there? I know that when I start stitching right here, I am definitely catching the back of this binding. You can see that all the way across, even over here. That's why I press it and push it so hard, so that when you turn it, you easily catch that binding when you're stitching that. I'm going to go stitch that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have stitched across here. You can see my stitch mark. I easily caught that binding, no problem. So now I'm going to take my bigger scissors here, and I'm just going to clip this off straight across, just like that. Okay, let's talk about binding. All right, so what I have is a 2-inch binding, like this. 2-inch strip, fold it in half, press it, right? One end, we're going to use a hot ruler, and you put under the edge, and we're going to fold it over a 1/2 inch. I'm going to show you on this end. Fold it over a 1/2 inch, just like this. Give it a good press. This, you're making the end of your little strap that goes around. The binding is also the strap. So now, because this is going to have to feed through clips, and it's going to be, or the D-rings right here, it's feeding through the D-rings. This is very thick because you've got so many you've got so many layers of fabric here, right? Because this is folded in half, and then it's folded again and again on itself like this. This is extremely thick. So what we're going to do is we're going to grade the seam allowance. All right, so all I've done is taken a pair of scissors and I just cut a little arc in this, just like that. And Joyce shows you how to do that in the pattern. This is what she's talking about. All right, so now my binding is good to go. All right, okay, to start this process, I know that when I put the binding onto this project, correct, it's going to go on like this, right? Okay, this end, this is the end I've graded, right? I need to mark a 2-inch mark on this side. So I have my fold is up, this is on this end, and I'm going to mark 2 inches over. I'm going to mark this with a friction pen. Make a mark at 2 inches. There we go. Just a little mark. All right, this mark now coincides with the top of this apron, just like this. Okay, so now to put the binding on, you're going to start right here, so a 1/4 inch, come onto the apron, and you're just going to keep on going all the way around. You get to here, up, and back to miter it, just like you would do a quilt, right? Around your edges, around, miter this, goes this way, back up, and now we get to here, okay? Now I'm going to cut this at 7.5 inches once this is sewn on. 7.5 inches, all right? And then we are going to fold it in just like this, and then we're going to continue sewing all the way out to the end of that, all right? To the end of your 7.5 inches. Let me show you what I did. All right, so you're sewing around. I mitered this corner around my curve, and I was pushing in this curve, right? And I kind of took a little bit of a tuck right here. Again, you know what? That's okay. No one's ever going to see that. Here, I took some little pleats in this just to make sure that that corner had some fullness to it. Around, because I'm not using bias binding, right? This is straight cut binding. Come up here, I measured 7.5 inches, cut and fold the end. Let me open this up a little bit. You can see I folded that, and you sew straight to the end. All right? Now, let's go ahead and get this ready to go to stitch it down. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, yep, you guessed it, is I'm going to press this with an iron, because you want to make sure that that is on there. You want that crease. Remember how we were doing the top band? Remember how I did that? Same exact thing all the way around. This is going to help you be successful in stitching this on, because we're going to stitch this by machine. Now, if you're really uncomfortable doing that, you could actually hand stitch this binding to the back and then go back and top stitch it if you don't want to do it the way I'm doing it. I'm just going to go for it. All right, so I know that I need to fold this edge. Is going to come in 1/4 inch. Let's go ahead and press that. This is my top strap. Okay. And see, then when you fold it to the back, again, you see how this naturally just wants to fold. And now I'm encasing that raw edge right there in that strap. And I'm just going to wonder clip this. I just want that to stay right there. Oh, let's turn that wonder clip over. And again, and one more at the very end. I'm going to stick on the very end of that. Just like that. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing to this strap. This is folded up, your 1/4 inch, right? Okay, and then this edge is coming over right on top of that. You see that? Perfect. Let me grab that little thread out of there. There we go. This one was easier. I'm just going to grab that, and I'm going to grab this. Okay. Now Joyce uses Stitch Witchery, Wonder Under. You can use any type of fusible if you like. You could attempt the glue thing here if you want. I am simply going to use my Wonder Clips. And I am pulling on this binding to get it to roll around the edge right where I want it. See that? Perfect. Push my corner out a little bit. And I'm just going to miter this corner just like that. That's cute. All right, I'm going to continue clipping. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so I have this all clipped, and I want you to see what's going to happen back here is I am going to take a tuck in this binding. But you know what? That doesn't matter. Why? Because this is on the inside, right? You don't see the binding. My binding is in the middle here. You never see that. All right? So do not panic if you take a tuck in your binding, right? It's going to be just fine. All right, so now we go to the machine, stitch this all around, start at the tip, down, all the way around, just stitch in the ditch, just like we did on this, and up to here, okay? This is what that looks like. Just like that. See how I started here? I came down, and then I just took a stitch off and then just started right in the ditch all the way around. See that? When I got to here, I took one stitch, I came off of that and just went right out here, right all the way up, okay? The next thing you're gonna attach are your D-rings. And these are in your kit. If you bought a kit from us, your D-rings, you have 4 of them in your kit. You're just gonna thread them on there and then come back. And I just sewed a little tiny rectangle right there. You could just sew a back stitch, anything just to make that stay there. Again, this is not going to have a lot of stress on this point. You're not hanging up by this. No one's wearing this, right? No, there's no stress on this. Okay, so I just sewed a little quick rectangle on here just so it looked cute and I was good. All right, I have this end and I have this end now. My D-rings are on here. So to thread them in, I thread 2 on like that. Open your D-rings up and now bring this tail up and back through. This takes a little bit of maneuvering because it's small. You feel like your fingers are giant when you're doing little stuff like this. It's a bit of a tight fit, but I can get that to go right through just like that. See that? Oh, that is so cute. Why is it always so cute? See, that makes the pain in the neck worth it, right? When you're making it, that's the way I always look at it. The cuter it is, it's worth it to make that. All right, so that concludes the apron front, okay? When I come back, I'm gonna clear this area and we're gonna do the backing and we're gonna get this put together. Okay, so let's get a back made for the apron. Now for the apron back, this is a little more thick. This is where you have your Insulbrite, your batting, and my backing. So I have 3 layers here. What I did was I just took this, I drew my lines on it, because I wanted it to match my apron. I wanted this to match with this. That's why I did it like this. If you're doing a different quilting design, you can do something else, but this was very quick, very easy to do. All right, so then I also have a lining of sorts, and that I'm going to show you on this one that's complete. That's what this is right here. So this is my backing. This is like a lining, right? That is with the shape flex, that's what this is, okay? All right, so I have my 2 pieces. I have quilted this already. Now I'm going to show you how to do this. We're going to turn this over. I have my Insulbrite facing towards me. I'm going to take my template. I'm going to center it on here, and I'm going to take a friction pen. Okay, so I'm just going to trace around this with a friction pen, and sometimes you got to go over it a couple of times to get it to write on the Insulbrite. I don't need a super dark line, but I definitely need a line. I need to be able to see where this template is. Now in the pattern, I'm going to tell you the way Joyce does this is she is using her apron front to trace around on here, because she said that when she made hers, they were all a little bit different. So if you do not have a template like I'm using, your apron front is probably a different size. So you're going to definitely want to trace the apron front on here like this. You're going to put your apron front on here like this and trace it. But you can see mine is exactly the size of the template. Every single one of these that I made came out exactly the same size, and that's due to the template. All right, I don't have any. Let's take a look. Oh yeah, I can see that. Okay, perfect. All right, now we need to add 1/4 inch to this and trim it. Well, I'm going to show you the easiest way I have for doing that. So on the bottom, I want to leave 1/2 inch, all right, because that's where we're going to turn this through, okay? And this is where we're going to leave our opening. So I'm going to leave 1/2 inch. So I'm going to use the 1/2 inch side of my Creative Grids 3.5 by 6.5. I'm going to put that on my friction line right there, and I'm going to cut that. And I'm going to do that line first. Okay, 1/2 inch. It's the only one that's different. Everything else is cut at 1/4 inch. So I'm going to again start at the top. I'm going to turn my ruler over. Now my 1/4 inch is with this little dotted line right here. Perfect. Dotted line, straight on your friction pen mark, just like that. Cut. You see how this little ruler, or this little rotary cutter is amazing. Now, how am I going to cut this? Well, I'll tell you what, let's not cut it right quite yet. Let's cut the sides. 1/4 inch. Perfect. Just like that. Let's cut the other side. This is the Tammy method. I will use a rotary cutter and a ruler 100% of the time to add 1/4 inch. I'm not a fan of redrawing a 1/4 inch on the outside of this. I'm just going to pick up a rotary cutter because I have to trim it anyways, right? So why am I worrying about that? I'll just take a ruler. Here we go. 1/4 inch. I'm going to start right here on the corner. There it is. I can see my 1/4 inch is perfectly on that line. Come on with your rotary cutter. And as I cut, turn, cut, turn, cut, turn. You see that? And my ruler, my cutter followed straight along. Oh, we missed a little bit. I'm going to go back with scissors and trim that instead of trying to do that with a rotary cutter. I'm afraid I'm going to get it off. Okay, let's do it again. This time I'm going to start at the top. So I have my 1/4 inch right here. Here we go. Down, and I'm just watching the curve right here, and I'm just curving my ruler right around. Just turn the spinning mat just a little bit. Just like that. You see there? 1/4 inch all the way around. Now let's do these bottom corners. Now, I'm not going to go very far because I am going to want to leave a 1/2 inch here, and I'll show you how I do that. Well, I left a 1/2 inch, but I'm going to show you how much of a 1/2 inch you need to leave. Okay, our corners are done. I'm good with that. All right, we need to leave about a 4 inch opening. So I'm going to mark 4 inches. It's going to be right here to right here. Now I'm going to take a pair of scissors. And I'm just going to trim up to 1/4 inch and trim this across, just like that. Trim to 1/4 inch. There we go. Perfect. That is how we do that. This, right sides together. Remember, this has our shape flex on it. This is our lining for our backing. Right sides together. Okay. Now, one thing that I am recalling that I did forget when I first made these is we have to put on the band on the back. I'm going to show that to you. It's this right here. It's like, wait a minute, we're missing our back strap. Let's talk about that. So to make this, we'll go to the ironing mat. To make this, I have a little tiny piece of shape flex in here. So to place that, I folded this directly in half, pressed it, put my shape flex in, fold this down, fold this up to meet your shape flex, and fold it in half, just like that. I put a wonder clip on each side of it, just like that. Took it to my machine and stitched down and down, right close to that edge. Okay, see, I did that. Okay, so now I need to get this attached before I stitch this to the back or I'm in trouble. Okay, so I'm going to come in about a 1/2 inch and I can measure that on my ruler. That's really close. Use one of these heavier pins to pin this so you don't bend your good pins. I'm going to make sure I don't take a tuck in this or take a twist in my strap. 1/2 inch. Set that there. and go. Maybe. There we go. And pin that. All right, you're going to stitch that with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, because you just want to tack this on there. Once you have it tacked on, upside down, pin, pin, pin. And now we get to back stitch here and sew all the way around till we get to right here. And I have done that ahead of time. Just like this. So you can see my marks right here. This is where I stitched my little back strap on. Sewed all the way around. Here's my opening right here. Back stitched here. Now Joyce tells you to then turn it over and double stitch these edges. So I double stitched, I just started here and double stitched my corner and around just like that, just to reinforce that. Okay? All right, we are ready now to trim this and clip our curves. You guessed it, I am using a rotary cutter to trim this again. Good. So I'm just going to trim my backing even with my project. Okay, and then I am going to pick up a pair of scissors and trim this. I found it easier just to grab a pair of these Karen K. Buckley scissors and just very quickly trim this curve out just like this, because you've already got it stitched, right? So you're not trying to put a perfect 1/4 inch on that. I just need to cut it off of there. Cut the bottom off. All right, there we go. Now, I need to clip my curves and I'm going to cut my corners just like we did on the pocket. All right, so I'm going to clip my curve just like this, being very careful not to clip into that stitching. I can see it. I'm being very careful. I'm going to cut my corner and again here. Put a few more clips in this, just so this seam is going to lay flat when we turn it the other way. Okay, I'm going to clip this corner off. I'm going to clip this corner off. Okay, now what we're going to do down here, Joyce suggests that we take our scissors, we cut in at an angle, and we cut an angle the other way. So you're actually cutting a little triangle shape out of this. You're actually cutting like a little V in here. Just like this. Again, be really careful. You're right next to your stitching there. I'm just going to clip another one over here. And we're going to trim this seam allowance on these curves to 1/8 of an inch. But I cut the V first because it's easier to clip that V when you have more fabric to clip into. All right, so now we're just going to really grade this seam back a little bit. What I'm mostly cutting is this batting I have in here. This batting is thick, and I know that's where I need to grade this seam. I'm taking that out of there if I can. I'm going to cut along here and take a little bit of that batting out. All right, we'll take a little bit out at the top and a little over here. All right, I like that. Okay, we're ready to turn it. So to turn it, I'm going to reach in. The first thing I'm going to grab is that strap. You see that right here? That's the first thing I grab. Now I'm turning this lining side. You notice I'm not playing with that fleece side, I'm playing with the lining side. Because that, oh, where did my strap go? I know I had it in my finger a minute ago. Here it is. pull the strap and just grab that lining side. You see how easy that turns now? Get that lining out of there. And the backing, the fleece just comes right with it. But I found that if I tried to turn it from the fleece side, you're just fighting that because it's so thick. Let's turn it the opposite direction. Again, you are going to use the heck out of a clover point turner. I'm just going to push out my corners now. You can kind of pull on these straps a little bit just to kind of help it. We're almost done. Oh, this is so cute. Right around. Poke out this corner. And now this curve, I'm just running that point turner in there. Oh, so cute. All right, again, run your point turner in there. You see how that just pops that seam right where I want it? Beautiful. Oh, that is adorable. Okay, let's clear the mess and go to the iron. Okay, let's press this out. All right. Okay, the other thing I want to do is I'm going to grade this seam back a little bit here because to turn this in, it is super thick. But I don't want to cut my fabric because my fabric, remember how we had that traced? I have a mark right here. Okay, I have a 1/2 inch mark. I know exactly where I'm cutting that, so I don't want to take that mark away. So I am going to cut my fleece only right here, my Insel Bright and my fleece. Without cutting the fabric. A little tricky because I have it quilted, so I'm just going to kind of cut around that quilting a little bit. There we go. I think that's going to make it much easier to fold this and press it. Okay, there we go. All right, so we have a 1/2 inch mark. I'm going to fold this to a 1/2 inch right here, and I'm going to press this first. That, I want that mark, I want that in there. Hold that there for a second and just give it a really good press. Now the rest of this should just fall right in, and it does. See that? And then this one will naturally just come in to meet its friend. Look at that. See how easy that is? I'm going to take my scissors, just the point of my scissors. I'm just going to kind of tuck that in just a little bit, just to make that lining and that backing just kind of meet right there. And now we're just going to give it a good press. I'm going to go ahead and press the rest of this out, and I'm just going to kind of roll my seam and just make sure that it's pressed where it needs to be. Now I'm going to hit this corner with the point turner one more time. Didn't quite get poked out. There we go. That's much better. Okay. There we go. That's better. All right. This is tucked in. This is tucked in. All right. So now the next thing you can do, Joyce has you just top stitch this apron, this backing, and she just suggests you start here, up, over, and around. But I have an opening here. Now she just used fusible, like a Stitch Witchery or something like that, to close this edge. I felt better about closing this edge. Let me show you where that actually is. See, it's right here on the back of the apron. I felt much better if I actually top stitch this entire thing. It's already on my machine. I might as well just top stitch it. So that is what I did. I just top stitched all the way around this. Okay, you can see that on here. All right, so that's my backing is now made. Here is my apron front, and I'm going to put the two together, and I'm going to wonder clip them together. I'll clean the wonder clips off the table. All right, there we go. I'm just matching my corners just like this. Match this corner together. Perfect. Whoop. Match this point just like that. Okay, and I'm just going to take this to the machine, and you're going to sew through all thicknesses. Start here or here. I'm sorry, you would start on this side. Start here and sew all the way around, right in the ditch, and that will attach the back to this. You are definitely going to want to back stitch here at these points, because if you're going to use this like a hot pad, that is definitely going to be your stress point right there. So you're going to want to make sure that these corners are very secure right here so that that stays there. The last thing you're going to do, and I'll turn this over so you can see the stitches, you're going to want to stitch a finger holder, is what Joyce calls that. So when I put my hand in, I'm going to split my fingers like this, and now you can grab something with it. So it's just a little stitch in here just to make it easier to grab things with if you do use this as a pot holder. I think this is simply going to hang in my kitchen. I know I'm not going to use it as a pot holder. Thank you so much for joining me. This is just an adorable project. I hope you have so much fun making these for your family and friends, for Christmas gifts, shower gifts, and for every season. I'll see you next time on a Shabby Fabrics tutorial.